Tehuti Ma'at. That means I'm offering you truth. Welcome to Professor and Priestess. I am Priestess. Mama Regina is the professor. And before I go any further, my beloved elder, Mama Regina, do I have permission to speak?
Absolutely.
Give thanks. Okay, so welcome. If it's your first time here, this is Professor and Priestess. This is a talk show series, and our first season is all about how revolution is the only solution. So we began the series with an introduction, so you can go back in the description and look at the different episodes that we've done thus far, and we've been going through the 11 pillar platform of Tehuti Ma'at, which is inspired by the 10-point platform of the Black Panther Party, whom Dr. Regina is an original Panther. So, Mama Regina, for those who it may be their first time here, they haven't watched the previous episode, can you please give them an introduction to you?
Sure. Um, I am a PhD, and I got my absolute start from Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who introduced me to the importance of studying. And so when I'm originally from Philadelphia, but I left Philadelphia as a runaway. I didn't tell anyone. I was in my teens, and I went to Oakland, California to join Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. I honestly didn't know what I was going to do with these brothers, but I had seen them in a film and the way that they stood up to police brutality. And I had been a witness to police brutality as a child and throughout my childhood. I decided that I should be with those brothers and I should give them my help, whatever that meant. And it actually meant a lot of study, a lot of studying. I despised school. I had left school. I hated school. School was awful because all they taught about was white people. And as you can see, I'm not white. So it was very difficult, in the 60s to go to school, junior high, high school. It was just terrible. Um, so the idea of study was not something that I absolutely enjoyed until I joined the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And maybe it wasn't even that we enjoyed study so much because some of the books were like Direction of the Earth, Mao Zedong sayings. Half of us, or 75% of us, didn't actually understand everything, but we got the revolutionary fervor from those works. In addition to Malcolm X, who I understood immediately, and Marcus Garvey, who I certainly understood immediately, but the idea of returning to school um, would have never occurred to me had it not been for the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And once I did go back to school, I thought I was just going to get a baccalaureate, Neff. I really did. I just wanted a baccalaureate because I thought I was going to be an elementary school teacher. One of the reasons I wanted to be an elementary school teacher is I love children. I had been someone who fed breakfast, free breakfast to the school children. So I really like children. And I'm a little silly sometimes. So I thought if I was an elementary school teacher, I could jump around and be silly with the children and it would be cool. But once I went to the university, actually, once I got into the university, because they wouldn't accept me at first because my grades had been so low and they thought that I couldn't keep up with a college curriculum. So I had to go to a community college first and I kept failing that. And that was fine. But I kept on until I could pass the writing and math classes. And then I entered Temple University. And like I said, at first I thought I was just going to get a baccalaureate, which was cool. Right on, right on. But then I really started to enjoy like the conversation back and forth between the professors and the students and even the students themselves, just having all kinds of opinions. So you're learning from the book, but you're also learning from your classmates. So I love that. Then I decided that, I really wanted to be a writer. So I decided I would get a master's in English and creative writing, which I did. Then I decided by this time I had seen the professor's life. Now, let me just give it to you straight. A professor works maybe 2 days a week, maybe three, where you actually have to go into the university. And then the other days are yours, which I absolutely adored that kind of freedom. So I said, well, hell, I might as well go ahead and try to be a professor. I could do this, and I did. And so that's my saga. And that's why I'm Dr. Regina Jennings, which I'm so very proud of. And I'm a writer. And I'm going to share some of the writings that I've already written with you because I wrote these books for Black people, not white people, not Asians, not Native. Although all of those groups are fine, they are wonderful. But I just want to be clear. My purpose is to help, elevate, empower Black people, Black people, Black people. And see, I already know what multiculturalism has done to us as a group. That's why I'm doing the Umar Johnson thing, saying it over at Black people, Black people, Black people. This is who I live for. This is who I write for. And that group, my group,
Mhm.
is who I hope I can inspire.
That's true. Um, well, I, for one, I feel it's very important for us to orient Black people into their Africanity. Today's session, as we already discussed in the previous episode, we discussed the importance of the ancestors and being oriented ancestrally, rooted ancestrally. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about Africa, the wealth of Africa beyond the land itself and the resources, as we always talk about all the resources and the mineral wealth. But I'm talking about the cultural wealth, the intellectual wealth, the human wealth, the ingenuity and the beauty of Africa, and why it's important for us to be orienting ourselves to the sun, right? So, from where most people are in the divided states, if you orient yourself to the east, where Ra, the sun, rises, then you're orienting yourself back home, right, to Africa. And we're talking about the origins of not only civilization, but of humanity. And the land itself is very significant, and the cultural identity is significant.
Very much so.
And I didn't introduce myself though, for those who don't know who I am, because I do want to take these names off of the screen. I'm Aust NeferKa. I'm the mother of Tehuti Ma'at. I am a farmer. I'm a spiritual warrior, healing artist, a high priestess of ancient Kemetic sacred science. I am, yeah, a healing artist. So I am a creator. I'm a singer, a songwriter, poet, and I'm an organizer, most importantly. With this work of Tehuti Ma'at and this revolutionary instrument, our intention is to to take and continue the baton of the Black liberation movement and bring it forward to create liberation and freedom within our lifetime. So the 11 Pillar platform is for that. And we define revolution as healing, liberation, restoration, elevation, and expansion. So the healing is primary, and healing our minds and really being able to define our identity and being able to be whole in that is essential, because unfortunately Africa is not does not get the respect that Africa deserves on the global front, right? So I even think right now, because there's so much division and attempts at division strategically around trying to get Black people to identify away from Africa or other than African, is very significant right now. So one of the things that I hear very often is people talk about the word Africa itself. Is obviously not an ancestral word. However, I like to pronounce the word as Afraka, because the etymology and the vibration of the word actually does have ancient origins. Ra being the sun, Af being the flesh, Ra is the sun, and Ka is the soul. And this is literally ancient African language in the Medu Neter of our Kemetic Happy Valley or Nile Valley ancestors that many people know as ancient Egyptian, right? You can't take Egypt out of Africa. Let's get that part clear. So, that being said, it literally means when we say Afraka, the flesh and soul of the living sun. When we say the original writing, Afrika, in that freak is actually Arabic for to divide or divided, separate. So it is important for us. The reason why we're turning to Africa and the main conversation around Africa and the diaspora of Africa is unification. We must come together. And until Africa becomes whole, not only the land, because we're still operating under the divided lines of the enemy, essentially, because technically the countries that exist in Africa today are not countries that were carved out by Africans. So those artificial borders are problematic to begin with. Even when we look at the African Union, it's everything is just codifying what was already established by the European parasites during the Berlin Conference. So I want to actually begin the conversation, Mama Regina, by asking you why? Why is Africa so important to our revolution, to our liberation?
Well, for one, because we were removed from Africa, and that was by design. As Malcolm X has said, some enemy went over to Africa and brought us here. I am in the Americas right now as we speak. And it is the first generation of Africans that wreaked havoc in the New World. I mean, the rebellions and the wars that Africans were waging in the Americas, those that were first enslaved here in the 15th and 16th centuries, that our enemies who wanted to keep perpetual slavery, that's what chattel slavery means, slavery forever. You will work for me forever, Neff, and I will pay you nothing. In fact, if I feel like beating your ass, I shall. If I feel like selling your children, I will. If I feel like choosing who you should mate with, well, I can. What are you going to do? You have no power here. So the Africans were deliberately separated. And not only were we, and when I say the Africans were separated, I mean, we have Mandingo, Wolof, Igbo, they're all Yoruba, they're all different kinds of ethnic groups that make up the African continent. So our enslavers, those bastards, knew this. So they would rarely, if ever, or never have, let's say, two Igbo people on the same plantation because they had spoken the same language. They did not want this. See, our enslavers were masters and mistresses of divide and conquer, what you just mentioned. They just excelled in that, okay? So they would make sure that there were different kinds of African ethnic groups on these plantations or farms or wherever enslaved people were hoarded. So, having said that, they said, well, we certainly can't call our slaves Africas, or I'm trying to say it like you did, Afraka or Africans. You know, we can't do that because see, if we say that, that's like giving them a whole sense of themselves. So we can't do that. So we have to rename them. So let's see, what can we call these savages that we are going to civilize? And they came up with the word Negro and its synonym nigger. Let's just call them that. Now, before or during the same time that we were being renamed, and we see this in Orlando, what's his name? Equiano's book. Anyway, he was a 17th century African from Guinea. Now, Guinea or Guinea is a place in Africa, a geographical place, a country. And Olaudah Equiano came from there. And him and his people they were no longer Ghanaian people. Not to, confuse you with Ghana. I'm talking about Guinea, not Ghana. They decided, we're talking about the rotten ass French, which we'll talk more about later, the Spanish, the Portuguese. They decided, well, heck, Guinea has so many, or Guinea has so many people that we can enslave. Let's turn that geographical place name into money. Guineas were currency. So then the people in this country were renamed a currency because guineas, you could go to the store with your guineas and you could buy stuff. Now you're from Guinea, but you see yourself transformed into coins, into currency. Now you put that together with the word Negro/nigger, and you cut off then people from Africa. You make a slice from Africa and you move that person and those people into a rubric, if you will, of currency. In fact, Neff, the enslaved people in this country got so used to, this is the second and third generation of enslaved people, to being called either guineas or Negro or nigger or whatever. They then even transformed themselves. They would think of themselves psychologically as money. There was a term during our enslavement days where those who were in bondage would say, is Master going to put us in his pocket? I think Master going to put you in the pocket. Dig. So what is that person saying? That person is saying, I am not a human. I can be put in somebody's pocket. So I'm either a guinea, which was a place name in Africa, okay, or I'm a dollar bill, which is currency in America. And I think that that is exceedingly significant. And I wrote about that, believe it or not, in this book, Poetry in the Black Panther Party, From Ancestral Memory, Morphogenetic Fields to Hip Hop. And I also wrote about the same thing in Malcolm X and the Poetics of Hakeem Marabuti. Why did I do that? I did that because Neff asked me about Africa. It's imperative that all of us who are of African descent understand how we were stripped from Africa, physically, linguistically, and regrettably, mentally. And this was by design. And it took place over the centuries that we've been in this country. Now, Neff originally asked me, well, what does Africa mean to me? It means where I come from. It means the people, my ancestors, my original ancestors, not necessarily the ones in this country, but those across the water. That's important. That's the Black person's homeland. So Africa means a great deal. Now, and this is important what I'm about to say too, Neff. Africa did not mean jack to me growing up. It didn't mean anything to most of the people I knew growing up. It meant absolutely nothing to my family members. And I'll even be more specific, and hopefully people understand me. It didn't mean much to Martin Luther King. He never mentioned Africa, not at all. And I'm not faulting him at all. Because when you look at Martin Luther King's main book, the Bible, Ham, the son of Noah, was terrible. He was cursed. It was a curse to be Black. So, and Egypt looked terrible. Pharaoh, oppressed people. What is this? So then our most esteemed leaders did not really have any kind of a reverence for Africa. It wasn't until I started to study, and again, this is in the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, when I read about Marcus Garvey for the first time. Then I had to rethink Africa. Now, I'm an elder. I grew up in the 1950s and 60s. On television, Neff, if you could have seen the, the shows on television that included Black people, and I'll just stay with Tarzan, the bastard. Not only did Tarzan control all of the animals, all of them, he would put out a call. Oh, the elephant. Oh, Tarzan is called. Now Tarzan is big white man. All right, Johnny Westmuller. Anyway, not only did this white man control Africa, and that was my image of Africa. The Africans that they did show, if they didn't, girl, they look like something out of a circus. I remember one, I think her name was Tata Tita. Tata had I think a bone in her nose, and she could, ho, hey, hey, ho, ho. I mean, the way that she spoke. Nobody wanted to be African. Nobody. Me, my friend, we hated that image. Worse, we thought that was real. We were not able to separate. Well, this is television. This is, creativity from white folks. This might be Hollywood. We couldn't make those separations. We weren't that smart. And our parents were working so hard. Plus, many of our parents believed in those images too. So nobody wanted to really be African, you see? So it took the Black Power movement, Neff, to give you the permission, if you will, to wear your hair so beautifully like you're wearing it. To actually put cowries, I think those are cowrie shells in. That was the Black Power movement, not the Civil Rights movement. Although, and I'm making this separation because today many scholars are writing about the Civil Rights movement and including the Black Power movement as if Black Power comes under civil rights, and it does not. It was completely different. So, to finalize my answer to what is Africa, to Africa is everything to me. It is my homeland. It is the land of my classical history. It is a land that has been much maligned. And one of the things that I absolutely wish to do while I am on earth is to share a true African historical, cultural history, and just like the book that I held up before, even though this says Malcolm X and the Poetics of Hakeem Adabuti, I go back to Africa and the first poets in Africa. And even in this book, Poetry in the Black Panther Party, From Ancestral Memory, Morphogenetic Fields to Hip Hop, I go back to Africa. Then I come forward into America as far as writing is concerned. So whenever I write, whatever I write, I start in Africa and then I come forward.
Right. And that's what the story of humanity is, because as life began in Africa, we have the migration and the population of the entire planet from Africa, everything coming out of Africa. So the other thing that I think is really significant about what you were sharing is, well, you said a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. So I'm going to try to see if I can recollect all those thoughts. One, the Black Power movement, and we're in a beautiful moment right now where being pro-Black is an empowering thing. We have images of Africa with the internet and everything shifting from, when you were coming up, all of that work, all of that bloodshed, all of that sacrifice did allow for this. I actually wrote in my Afro Reflections, a piece that I did about coming to terms with my hair, right? Because I spent my entire childhood and into my adulthood trimming my hair. And when I decided to shave my head and to grow back my hair naturally, I really had to work through that because my nappy hair, as I was growing my afro, like I would literally look in the mirror and I felt like I was ugly.
Yes.
And I really had to genuinely work through that. And then but because I knew, consciously I knew, but that subconscious aspect is what you really have to work through, because you can know something consciously and still not really fully believe it and have it fully
Mm-hmm.
integrated, because the subconscious is really operating the bulk of our behavior and our reality. So
Yes.
for me, it was really about coming to terms with my roots, literally, because it's like the nappy hair is the thing, for me, that really roots me in my Africanity. So to get to the point where I'm at now, where my hair is lost, and it was a journey to get here. So I did write a lot
Yes.
about that, because our image of
Good.
Africa
Good.
has been, or yeah, well, we've been programmed and conditioned into having that perspective. And I do want to lift a comment, and I want to shout out everybody who's here with us live. Please tap in the chat. We'll definitely shout you out. And if you want to engage in the dialogue or ask a question, you can do so. I want to speak to our brother who put a comment here saying one trope that I notice in the media is that they will have a cartoon in Africa with a lot of animals as the main character, and there are no humans in sight. Um,
Ooh,
and
let's stay with that for a minute. That
yeah,
is
yeah.
so significant. Okay, so trigger happy 262 plus. You
You
guys and
want me
those
to
names. Okay, that I think that is very significant. Okay, I wouldn't have known that. This is what I love about this form. I would not. I mean, how many cartoons do you think I look at? Come on. So I would not have known that. And since they are doing that, I just want to emphasize that is by design. Remove the peak. Now keep the animals, keep the resources. Let people know that there are a lot of fabulous flora or animals on the continent. But let's do genocide on the people. You dig?
yeah,
That
I
so
want to
that then
his
is by
comment
design.
because he continued on, and I think this is really good. So you can continue commenting, Mama Regina, but I want to complete his thread. And even the
Yes.
anthropomorphism of the animals are depicted as white. For example, the Lion King, those animals are quoted as white people, even though the story is literally in the safari in East Africa. I mean, at least when they did the remake, they brought Beyonce in, right? If it was an accurate coding of the characters, they would be speaking Swahili, right?
That's right. That's right.
It's also interesting that the story of the Lion King directly comes from Kemet. It's literally the story of Asar being murdered by Set, his brother, and
Mm.
then his son Simba has to
Mm-hmm.
go back, fight, and avenge his father's death and reclaim the throne that's rightfully his.
Mm-hmm.
Go through
Mm-hmm.
this process of maturity and come into being. He has to return back to his ancestry and turn to his father. Like it's a very clear, um, you know, expression of that story from our ancient prophecy, which I do want to speak on because I didn't mention that the Afraka and that specific pronunciation and vibrational expression of saying the word using the Medu Neter, the ancient language, is something that I got from my spiritual father, Baba Heru. And what I also want to speak on is when Baba Heru interpreted the prophecy of Ast and Asar, right? He clearly, and he was the first person that I ever heard express that the prophecy is an expression of the division of Africa. Because remember, during the Berlin Conference, the European parasites divided and carved Africa into 13 colonies. And when Set kills his brother Asar, he cuts Asar's body into 14 pieces.
Interesting.
And when As and Nebetet go to look for all the pieces, they find the 13 pieces of his body, and the one piece that's missing is his erection, his henenun, right? And because his erection was missing, that was the 14th piece. So Baba Heru had expressed, and this is something that resonates so true, that those pieces of his body is the prophecy of the unification, right? The sisterhood, Ast and Nebetet coming together to put the pieces of his body back together, which I feel is the divine masculine collective spirit, right? Because that's why they castrated our men, right? And that's something that we really have to look at, because what does the man represent energetically, right? And that active principle is what has stifled us. So putting together those 13 pieces, and then when Aust, his wife, fashions his erection out of clay, there's different interpretations of the story. That represents, because remember, the erection, the sperm comes out when the erection ejaculates. That is the seed, right? Those are the children of Africa. So that part was seen as the unification of the diaspora of the children of Africa that are spread all over the world now.
Okay, that's
So
beautiful.
prophetically, when all of those pieces come together and the diaspora is in place, us then says the words of power, and it's beautiful. I've seen this in the temple of Heteru in Dendera when I went, and it's so beautiful to actually see. Like, you can actually see the story progressing on the temple walls, and then you see her body take flight over his body as a falcon. So it's like her head, and then it shows her body as a falcon over him, and then he begins to resurrect and he rises from the dead. So that is the resurrection of Africa. That is what we're moving towards. That is what is necessary. And that unification of Africa is what is happening right now. So this is a very, very beautiful moment that we're in right now, because I do want us to speak about what's going on the continent right now, because we did speak about the French. Here where I am was colonized by the Portuguese, but I think the most, and I think the Portuguese were probably the most gruesome of the European enslavers, and they were the initiators of the trade. However, the French are the most diabolical, in my opinion, when it comes to the way that they still have their clutches in Africa. They're still
And the way that they're
extracting
speaking about them right now.
from the African economy.
Mm-hmm.
What was that, Mama Regina?
No, I was just saying, and the way that the French are, how Macron is even speaking about them right now. He's speaking in a way like he said, Burkina Faso, Mali wouldn't even exist if it hadn't been for the French. He had the audacity to say that a couple of days ago.
And it's interesting. It's just interesting, right? The audacity of them to extract $500 billion a year from Africa. Excuse me, France wouldn't exist if it weren't for
It's
Africa.
right.
That,
That's true.
so let's get that clear. Now, what's happening right now with Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Gabon now has just had a military coup. We are literally watching the unfolding of the extraction of the French neocolonial power out of Africa. And
That's
this is
right.
a monumental thing. It
Yes,
is
it
actually,
is.
it's like, it's literally what I just described, because that has to happen first. We have to unite within ourselves before we can make alliances with other groups of people. We have to be clear. That's why we're saying orienting to Africa, centering ourselves in Africa. If we are centered in our own roots and our own identity, then we can engage with the world, because we're engaging from a place of power, because we created the foundations of all of these other traditions and cultures. But if we don't operate from that sense of dignity and pride, we cannot take our proper position on the world stage, because the battle right now is for world power. We're not talking about national politics. So we have to really get clear on the geopolitical stage, because the order of the day is globalization. The distraction of the day is the national pageantry. So it's very important for us to be clear on what's going on in the world. We cannot take and swallow hook, line, and sinker what the mainstream media and these propaganda outlets and different mouthpieces are telling us about what's going on in the world. Oh, China's the villain and
Absolutely.
Russia's the villain. And we have to have ourselves at the center to know what is in our interest. And without
That's right.
having a national identity, without knowing what nation you belong to, you'll be misplaced with your allegiances to the wrong group of people
Exactly.
and what's in your interest. So I do want us to talk about the current state of Africa, Mama Regina, if that's something that you want to comment on. We did. I
I
just want to touch
do. I do.
real,
Did you want to
real
read
quick.
that?
You have a very important point, and the story is found in Mali, which kind of shows more cultural continuities with Kemet and the rest of Africa. Yes, I love to always connect Kemet to Mali because they are still carrying that tradition, and they say it and they know it. We can look at it cosmically because the origins, when we look at the story of Amma, when we look at all of the different cosmologies of Mali and the Dogon in particular, they're coming right out of Africa at the core of the golden age in what we call today's Kemet or the Kushite Empire. So thank you for sharing that comment. But I want to give you the floor, Mama Regina, to comment on.
Sure. Now, what I'd like to do though, before we get into the glory of what's going on in Africa, and it is glorious, people, and Neff is absolutely correct. The mainstream media is not going to report this to you. Why would your enemy report good news to you? And I want everybody who hears this to understand that we are at war and have been at war with the controllers of this country. Understand that. So I absolutely want to talk about what's going on in Africa right now because this is a unique moment in time. I'm going to kind of deviate for a minute, Neff, because something just importantly occurred to me. Now, you had mentioned that this is a retrograde period. Mercury's in retrograde. Am I correct with that? Okay.
Yes, you are correct.
Does that have anything to, like you were saying, it's an illusion, like the planet is going backwards, but that's an illusion. I remember you saying that last episode. Is there a relationship between that and what's going on the continent right now, where all of these beautiful Black people are standing up for themselves and demanding that their European oppressors get out of town? Is there any kind of a relationship between the planets and that remarkable happening on the continent?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked that question because there's a connection, there's a cosmic connection to all things. One of the greatest African proverbs that I know of is the law of consubstantiation, as above, so below. And what's happening above us, because even that mythology that I just shared is a cycle of the stars. When we see Aust and a star, right, Sirius and a star's belt, we always see Orion's belt, right, the three stars that the great Merkuti, the pyramids in Giza, modern day Egypt, are aligned to those stars. That is the star. And then Sirius or Septet, Sabu Septa, is in the dog constellation, Canis Major, as we call it. That is actually us. So where we're at right now, when that rise happens every single year during the dog days of summer, right? When we have Black August, which we talked about also in a previous episode, that is when that energy is rising, right? So everything is always reflecting that below. And what we have to remember is that we're moving into cycles. We're moving through cycles, I should say. And that's part of our ancestral legacy as people of African ascent is to return back to our cosmic consciousness because we always recognize as the first inhabitants and populators of this planet that our origins are cosmic and that
Right.
this realm is part of that cosmic universal dance that the soul experiences in order to grow and to cultivate and to express itself and continue to revolve as everything is revolving and spirals through time. So when I have to say that to answer your question because so
Yes,
much is
yes.
happening in the stars right now. So much is
Oh,
happening in
okay.
the cosmos, in the heavens, with the celestial bodies that's influencing what's happening right now. And specifically, the spirit of revolution is really housed in the energy sphere that we know as Pluto, which in our ancestral language is Benu. And if you're interested in learning more about this, like orienting to the sun and through natural cycles, we do have our initiation of the Navigating Eternity course, where you can actually learn how to really orient ourselves back into solar cycles and natural systems to be more efficient with our energy and out of the linear time paradigm of the European enslavement of our minds, right? So that's very essential to be foundational. But in addition to that, we're working on a Kemetic zodiac series, which brings us to the African origins of astrology and astronomy, right? So that energy sphere that we call Pluto is Bennu. Bennu is the phoenix in the Greek, right? So many people know the phoenix rises from the ashes. It's a revolutionary energy. It's an energy that's all about death and rebirth, right? Because that's what revolution is about. It's about moving through cycles. And Pluto is about to be in the energy of Hapi, which is Aquarius, which is all about revolution. So it did move into Aquarius and then it moved back because it's in retrograde right now. So, yes, this is absolutely Bennu retrograding and turning up the soil because what Pluto is going to do is going to pull it out by the roots. So, it's bringing things back to make sure it didn't forget anything. It's doing that integration work to make sure that everything that's happening. So, that's what that, because remember, we're dealing with military coups. So we're talking about military powers coming into play in Africa right now. So because there are military powers that are in play, you're talking about that retrograde being an opportunity to regroup, to retreat, to gather the troops, and to strategize before moving forward. So that's exactly what's been happening. And with each wave, we're going to get more and more energy towards this revolutionary, really outcome victory that's ahead
Jesus.
because it's written in the stars. We've already won. All we got to do is do what we need to do to make that a reality, and that's what's happening right now with the countries that we named, right? And the fact that they are all former French colonies, and I would say
Yes.
neo-colonial French colonies, because the way that France, that agreement that they did for the independence, so-called independence, really tied those countries that were former French colonies really deeply in with France to make sure that France has access to all of their resources, gets first choice, first dibs essentially on the resources before they can hit the market, so they can literally buy things and then trade them over for 10
That's what they do.
price, right? And we're talking about natural resources that we require for everything. And when we talk about the mineral wealth, we're talking about our devices, our phones, our laptops, all of
That's
these
right.
things that we utilize, the batteries in these electric vehicles, everything is being powered by the mineral resources of Africa. So that's very important for us to take into consideration as well. So, yes, retrograde is definitely turning it up.
Okay. Okay. I wanted to, before I actually add to the uprisings, or no, the revolutions going on in Africa, I wanted to take us even back to the Americas and this linguistic war that these people had engaged with us. Like I have studied from old Oxford English dictionaries, and I was really shocked at some of the words that I found, and I wanted to share them with you and our audience. And this is what they did with the word nigger, Nigger. There were a nigger driver, there was nigger hair, there were nigger jockeys, there were niggerdom. Niggerdom was niggers collectively. There were niggerisms. There were nigger fish. There were niggerlings. There were nigger dogs. Now, I want to stop with nigger dogs because that's exceedingly important to our history. Nigger dogs were a specific breed of dog that they trained to hunt Negro slash niggers. And this is how they trained them. They would make a black dummy, if you will, somewhat like a mannequin. And they would put food in the center of that mannequin or dummy, right? Then they would starve the dogs, starve them. Then, when the dummy slash mannequin had the meat in his stomach, then they would release the dogs to go after that black person that had meat in their innards. See, those kinds of tortures, they don't want to write about those, you see. But nigger dogs were a specific group that were trained to hunt down and often chew the insides of any escaping black person. So I wanted to, and the Spanish, oh, they love nigger dogs. Absolutely. They love them. They brought them over to the New World, you know. And so I just wanted to add that to show the depth of depravity that African people have had to overcome. And check out this about the nigger dogs. This idea of nigger dogs came from Europe. In Europe, they would catch a bear. It was called bear baiting. And they would tie the bear to a tree, okay? But they would leave the bear's feet free so the bear could at least, move his or her feet. And once again, they would starve dogs and then let the dogs, starving dogs, jump all over the bear. And those Europeans would clap, yeah, eat him, get him. These are the people that own black people on the continent of Africa and in the Americas. Yet these are the same people. First of all, they had the luxury and the leisure to be able to write Negro history, if you will. Because if you have people working for you and you don't have to pay them, imagine how much money that you can accumulate. And you are the writer of history. And the Germans were great for this. They said Africa had no history. Africa was the dark continent. Africa was full of savages. And I'm bringing all of this up because I want all of us to really understand from where we have come. See, we've come a very long way, and we have overcame a lot of psychological damage because the things that I am expressing to you, our ancestors, our enslaved ancestors in this country, this was their everyday life. That they were niggers, that they were nothing, that they came from a savage continent. Now, strains of that still live in the Negro slash African American psyche. Why do I say that? Because your leaders today and yesterday have betrayed you. I'm talking about the politicians. I'm talking about the people who got into office after the 1960s, after we were willing to tear this country apart, okay? Because we were willing to wage real revolution. So our enemies had to come up with something. So they put some of the most tame people in office that you are dealing with today. Okay? And this is why I say that the leadership, the black leadership of today has betrayed black people. And I'm talking particularly in America. Now, what Neff just mentioned about what's going on the continent, are you getting that from the mainstream news? Are you getting like a full story? Do you know about Ibrahim Traore and the other fabulous? Aren't those soldiers handsome? Those soldiers are good. Ibrahim, look, if I was 40 years younger, I'd be on a plane and I would be going right to Burkina Faso because I would know he would need my help. But since I'm an elder, I can certainly be his aunt or something. He is glorious, just glorious. That's who I am
Because
now. But what I'm getting at here is more than likely the information that I've gotten and that Neff has gotten about what's going on the continent. The mainstream news will never give you the full story. And I want people to understand that you have to go to alternative modes of news to really get a full story of what's going on in this momentous time
yeah,
period. That is,
and
this is an extraordinary time period.
yeah, and you have to really have discernment with that as well. Because again, I had mentioned in one of the episodes, I don't remember which one, but I had talked about how our holistic symmetry, our revolutionary ideology is built on what we call holistic symmetry, which is infusing the work of Dr. Leonard Jeffries and his pyramid analysis, because he provided us with that African centered, holistic system of analysis, right? So looking at the politics, the economics, and the culture. You always have to
Mm-hmm.
look and orient yourself into all of that, because even the alternative media sources, you got to remember these people are also still coming with a particular cultural orientation, economic orientation, in addition to their political analysis. So I just want to apply discernment or encourage discernment within that, especially because you just brought up the dog energy again. I mentioned the dog days of summer, the dog star, which Sirius is,
Mm-hmm.
which is the energy of Ost. Ost is also my namesake, so I take that responsibility of carrying that energy very seriously. And I feel it's very important to acknowledge that Asar, Ost's wife, Ost's husband, excuse me, who they put the pieces of his body back together, in order to have that resurrection. He also, in the mythology, had another child. He had a child before he had a child with her, which is the one that she gave birth to after he resurrected and impregnated her, right? And that child is known as Anpu. Anpu is the jackal, or symbolized by the jackal. And it is the principle of discernment and good judgment. And the jackal, right, that dog energy, right? We're going back to that, right? It has a keen sense of smell. That's why it's known for having good judgment. The jackal will literally bury its its food after it hunts. It has to decompose to a certain degree in order for the jackal to be able to digest it. So it will literally bury it and then come back and sniff it out to make sure that it has decomposed enough before it digs it back up and actually eats it. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a patience that's required with discernment as well. There's a lot of deep, powerful symbolism within that. And I just wanted to express that because that's really key for us moving forward. When we're talking about orienting to Africa, we're talking about orienting ourselves culturally. And we're also talking about, I think as far as our leaders are concerned, another leader that really did a beautiful job of expressing to us the importance of orienting ourselves back to Africa was Malcolm X. And Omawali Malcolm X also was the one who told us that revolution is based on land. And if we're talking about the primary resources for society to function today with the current technology, even, but even beyond that, fundamentally, most of the minerals and the wealth is coming from the continent of Africa. So if we're going to orient
That's right.
ourselves onto land, we have to recognize that Black is not an identity that orients us to land. Now, if we want to talk about our blackness, right, just like when the name Kemet, it's speaking to our blackness because Kun is carbon, it's blackness, right? It's the essence of what makes us black. A lot of people use the word melanin, but that's just a
Yes.
European given to us. It's not based on the fundamental aspect of our biology that makes us black, or that
Say that again.
absorbs
Say that
that
again. Say that
aspect of the
again.
sun.
Neff, say that again. That word that you said, was it Say that again.
Say which part again? The
The
hmm,
did you call it that is let's say a synonym, if you will, maybe a weak one for melanin. Well, melanin is a weak synonym for, what did you
or
call it?
carbon. It's kun, kun. Like when we say
C.
kumet, kemet,
Yes.
K,
Ah,
yes,
gotcha.
that K
Cool.
part, the KM,
Yes.
right? Kun. That part, so they Kemet, it's, they say land of the black or black land, right? Because we're
Right.
putting together sounds, two vibrations. But that black part is actually kum, which is carbon. It's literally, the symbol for it is burnt charcoal. It's literally black, right? And what is charcoal in that state? It is absorbent. So it's that absorbent property of carbon. And that's what our ability to absorb um certain frequencies, I'll say, because it all comes down to vibration, certain frequencies from the sun that other people who are not able to process them, right? We know this because, they get they get that, it's not that, because even we as black people, we can get sunburned. It's not about getting sunburned, but it's literally your inability to actually process and synthesize the that particular aspect of solar energy, right? And this is a solar powered planet. So to me, it's very obvious the situation that we're in. I think Dr. Frances Cress Welsing in the ISIS papers does a
She
beautiful
does
job of
indeed. Good.
fear of genetic annihilation because of the lack of carbon. But I said that just to orient us back into our identity and rooting our identity in nature, in land, so that we can have a revolutionary identity. And our identity always revolves, right? Like you said, it was Negro to African American to Black. So how do we continue to create power, right? As Huey put it, power is the ability to define phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. I think it's very important that that conversation is going to progress and continue, especially when you have
Mm-hmm.
people who are struggling right now to come to terms with their identity and are being misled to identify with a different, like completely like uprooted perspective of who they are. So I think land ultimately does root us. And when we talk about that, we're talking about being the original people of the planet. So it's like when people want to argue about and be divisive in terms of saying, oh, we didn't come from Africa. We were the first ones in America and we were the first ones everywhere. If that's the
How
case,
about that? That's right. That's right.
it's that. It's
Very
about having
good.
that respect owed to our ancestors. And technically, all of us that are here right now at this point, with the exception of very few, are completely like we're mixed with other things at this point.
This is
Like
true.
that's the reality of it. But we're talking about having an ode and respect for the original people of the planet. That's why we honor our
Mm-hmm.
blackness, regardless of how light my skin might be. I acknowledge the fact that I'm African, that I'm a black woman. So
Right.
it's something that is really about your political identity as well, because we have to recognize that everything is political.
Oh God.
So
Oh
maybe
Lord. Because you reminded me of something that happened decades and decades ago, and I just had to laugh because I'll never forget. I had a teacher. Remember in my intro of myself, I was saying, how I went through college and all this sort of thing. So I had like this teacher, a male teacher, and he called me into his office and he says, why do you always write about the whatever subject I give you, you write about this black stuff. Why are you doing that? You're not really black. I was like, you motherfucker, you. Now I did not say that. I wanted an A. But I said, so when you talked about that, right? Um, your skin tone, and it just took me back to that moment in this fool's office, and I told him, I said, you're right, I'm not black, I'm African. I'm African, and this is what I'm going to write about. I didn't care what the subject was. You could tell me to write a math equation. Well, I was going to write it either in Meginetta or something. I was going to do something that was African. And I remember, like, even when I was coming up, like playing in the street in South Philadelphia on Anna Street, the kids would say, well, I had a nickname. I'm not going to tell you. Regina, yeah, your hair may be long, but it ain't good. And I was like, oh, okay. My hair is long, but it's not good. Okay. Because I got my identity, okay, from my playmates, all right, from the school system, Okay, because my parents, I mean, or my parent, never even discussed anything like that. So I honestly, Neff, I swear to God, I didn't know what I looked like. I thought, well, maybe I'm kind of cute, when the boys started, sniffing around me. But I said, nah, maybe they just crazy, they just niggas. So, I mean, really, because this country has not really established any kind of beauty standards for us. We had to do this for ourselves. And you had talked earlier about your hair and what you did with it when you chopped it off, then you let it grow back. We went through the exact same thing as members of the Black Power movement and the Black Panther Party. I mean, like when I got my afro, because they had to curl mine, I had to get little curlers on up so it could go up like this and not be down like this, So that, and when I went by a mirror, I was like, do you really want to do? I mean, I listen. I had what they called a flip and uh, whatever. The point is, when we were brave enough, okay, and even as sisters today who decide to wear their hair not like anybody else's, but out of an African tradition, that is a form of bravery. And many of you might even know that some sisters, as we speak, are fighting to keep their employment because they want to wear their hair in a natural style. And their employers are saying, you cannot do this. So the struggle continues right now. And I want to add this too about what's going on in Africa. It's marvelous, but also Neff mentioned discernment. You have to, she's absolutely right. Because, see, I did not realize that the president of Nigeria, I despise, I can't stand him. I mean, he works with ECOWAS, which is a Black group in Africa that gets its money from the United States. So you know what that tells you. And even right now in Gabon, I believe, and Mali, Al Qaeda is fighting them. Well, Al Qaeda was created by the United States, no question. These are renegade Muslims, that will indeed kill other people. They're renegades. They're not your friends. And they, in fact, are fighting some of the forces that we are rooting for who have told the French to get out of their country. This is going on right now. And this really smells like and looks like to me the hands of certainly not only the French, but the Americans as well. They'll be low key in America
Yeah,
about it
that is
because they know we're here.
yeah, they're all focused on protecting their interests.
That's
And I
right.
also you said was really key because we have to remember there's that saying. I love that saying that we're not born in Africa, Africa is born in us. And that's something we
Okay.
really have to really take to heart because it's not a superficial thing. It's not about what your hair looks like. It's not about your complexion. It's not about your outfit, how much red, black, and green you have, or how many Chinese red, black, and green flags you got flying around, unfortunately, because a lot of them drinks are made in China, which we need to take care of. Um, but it's not about the superficial things. Yes, those are expressions that, we do want to embody. And the reality is our authenticity is in the truth of us being able to be confident and clear about who we are in our natural state. So when we look at like the beauty standards and like even what you just said about the politics around it and how literally it's affecting people economically, crippling people
That's right.
economically, when you can't make money if you show up in your natural state because that's a form of intimidation and
Yep.
control.
And control.
And on top of that, when we look at just we're gonna do gonna be a whole episode on this tomorrow for the Navigating Eternity astrology series. We're going in on the beauty situation because when we look at what's going on right now with the beauty standards, you know, it's really serious when we look at the fact that there's so much vanity based on insecurity where people are literally changing their natural state, getting surgery.
Oh
taking on a
yeah.
whole bunch of stuff, spending all this money on wigs and weaves when we're in the condition that we're in. Because it's all about the context. Because people love to bring up, and I'm not even gonna go in on this, but I do have to say it because people love to say they wore wigs in Kemet. Yes, and they made
Oh,
them damn.
okay.
They made their
They didn't go. Neff, are you kidding? Are you telling me they didn't go to the Asian shops? No.
no. They weren't wearing the Indian person's hair or plastic, right? Made from the oil and the petroleum that's being extracted from your land for pennies on the
Yes.
dollar that they're selling you these wigs. Not to mention the health effects and all of the other things. It's like it's about context and consciousness. Like we can't make choices strictly off of vanity when we're not dealing with the ramifications of those choices. So we're going to talk about that though tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to have a live stream, Navigating Eternity, because we're going to be talking about this retrograde that we just cleared with Venus,
Okay.
which is all about beauty, which is really magnetism and attraction. It's really the force of magnetism and attraction. But we're going to talk about how that has been distorted and how exactly we can center ourselves and how this retrograde was really supporting us in embracing authentic expressions of beauty and
Neff, can
turning
I
with
ask you? I want to ask you something. How did you get to be what you are right now? Because I know good and well you did not come out of your mother's womb talking like you. It's just impossible. I'm just going to say it's impossible, even though I don't know your story. So
no, I did not come out my mother's womb with a head wrap on. No, how did I get here? I mean, first of all, I have a video which I'm about to make private. So if people want to watch it, there is a video on there that talks about my 9-year healing journey. And I'm just telling the
okay.
story. This is my first time like kind of coming out about my entire journey. But in a Kari shell, what I'll say is the land activated me. In 2013, I had already shaved my head, right? Because I remember that day I had my partner, he just, I know you don't like me to say partner. My man
No, I
at the
don't.
time
But that's all right.
shaved
Go ahead. Go ahead.
and before I left to come here, it was actually his idea. He was like, I talk about this a lot. So I'm going to try to keep this concise, but I have to give
Okay.
context. So I was in the fashion industry. So for me, I was living my dream job, living my dream life in New York City. I had moved. I got this internship to work for Manolo Blahnik because I used to love Sex in the City, and I always wanted to just be like Carrie and her Manolo. So I was literally working at Manolo Blahnik. I got to meet Sarah Jessica Parker in the elevator one day. It was like, that was me. So fangirl, like very superficial. And at the time, I just had a short, like pixie cut, but I used to perm my hair. Like I said, since I was like 8 years old, I was perming my hair, 7. Um, so at that time, it was like divine intervention because this whole situation had
Mm.
played out. The women that I worked with, which were actually mainly like Hispanic women, who I guess hated on me because I kind of went over their head and I went directly to the president. I was like, I want a job because I was in the elevator. It was very like fashion industry, like Devil Wears Prada. Like if he comes, nobody goes in the elevator with him. The president of the company, and I'm like, I'm not getting out the elevator for this. So I would just be in the elevator, but it was my dream job. So I would literally show up dressed to the nines, wearing my heels, all done up to work. And it was a gay man, and he was like, "Oh, you always look so great. If you ever, whenever you're ready for a job, just let me know." And I was interning. They had renewed my internship twice. And when I went in the elevator with him, and he told me that, I was like, "Shit, I just want a job right now. Like, why not?" So I had spoke
Wow.
to his like hand, and I told her, and she was like, okay, you should just come early one day and come up to his office and talk to him. And I went and I spoke to him, and he was like, okay. He called in his assistant Flo and the assistant to the account executives that I was interning with, and they were like, yeah. He sat with them privately and asked them like about my work and everything. They were like, yeah, she's been here twice. We invited her to come back because she's so great. Da, da, da. He was like, all right, great. When I come back from Paris, you can start. And I was like, oh, wonderful. That didn't happen. Needless to say, I was jobless, and that was very unexpected. And that really drove me down into a spiral of just like, what am I going to do? I saw that as divine intervention because at the time I didn't
Okay.
know it, but I was being
Okay.
raw directed. And during that,
Right.
we wanted to, just get away from the city because, he was like, you know what? We had been together for a year at that time. He was just like, I think maybe we should just like get out for a couple months and just go somewhere out of the city. And at first we was thinking about just going to Florida or something. He's like, why don't you go to Cabo Verde? Like, I've always wanted to go there. Your father's there. You got your family there. And I was like, oh, I guess why not? And that was, I had come to Cabo Verde before, but I had only gone to some of the other islands. I never came back here to Fulgu, which is where my mother and my father were born. And that was my first time coming here. And when I was on the land, and my father had already been here for 11 years, he was farming. And yeah, I was just like, I don't know how to describe it other than I was completely activated. It was like something about the land and being immersed in nature, just the foods that I was eating, just the air itself, like being up
Mm.
here in the mountains with high altitude because we're 2,000 miles above sea level. And it completely transformed my entire perspective on life. And at that point, I went through a process of just detoxing, like watching documentary after documentary after documentary, learning what's going on politically, the psychotropic drugging, and how they're just all the conspiracies, like just getting real clear. And I'm not talking about conspiracy theories. I'm talking about like getting into the history and really learning things, doing research. Because when you're out of the rat race, you can actually think.
Yes.
You can put
That's
yourself
true.
out there. You can look
That's
at it.
right.
Saw the
That's
level
right.
of depravity that existed here and simultaneously the beauty that existed here. I'm just like, whoa, what is going on? Because everything here is so polarized that you can see everything so clearly because it's the same thing that's happening in the divided states, but you don't see it as clearly because it's not as stark. And here it was just like it opened my eyes to everything. And I never went back the same. Literally went back, started doing programs, teaching people about pre-colonial African history. My cousin out here had introduced me to Sacred Woman, the book by Queen Afua. So that was my first
Yes.
time awakening to the power of the womb and our ancestral legacy. And yeah, from there on out, it was just like my genetic memory awakened, and the rest is how I got here.
Well, I do know something about you that you had mentioned before, and I really wanted to even get more details about that. When you had mentioned what had happened to your grandfather and that you
Mm-hmm.
actually saw this, are you are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So what Regina is referring to is like I think in the last episode or the previous episode, I had shared a piece called Freddie Ain't Dead. And in that piece, I actually talked about it because I said I remember at only 4 years old witnessing an act so bold, courage in front of a sawed-off shotty that blast that dropped the body, the barrel that spit the bullets that took his life, staring at death, no fear in Papa's eyes. So that's about my grandfather who was murdered in front of me when I was 4 years old. So in Boston, where I was born, my grandfather had invested in bought a property on a corner lot and he opened like a bodega, pretty much it's like a corner store. And there was a brother that came in to rob the place and he had a sawed off shotgun. And I used to be there. My mom would be at work. And I remember my dad was there too, but for some reason my dad was not inside the store at the time. I was inside the store with my grandfather. And the brother came in to rob the place. He had a sawed off shotgun and he was threatening my grandfather. And my grandfather only had $5 in that register. And he
Damn.
knew he only had $5 in that register. But my grandfather was like, yeah, fuck out of here. So it's also a sense of just like real deep pride, but also real serious courage to
Yeah,
stand in
sure.
front of a sawed off shotgun and say, no, I'm not opening the register. And the man shot him and killed him in front of me. And I had not come to terms with what had happened until I was about 23 years old because of other things that were happening to me. And then I had to deal with it. And it was actually Baba Heru who thankfully, had guided us and said,
Ah,
that you have to,
okay, okay.
and he said for me to go inside and figure out if there's some things that have happened that I haven't dealt with to deal with. That was the first thing that came to my mind because, and immediately, the moment that I remember my consciousness just shifting inside and me sensing like that must have done something to me. Because obviously I knew it happened, but I hadn't processed it because I always convinced myself that I was too young. I was only 4 years old. I don't remember what happened. But the reality is, my 4-year-old brain could not process it and it had to suppress that memory. And it was a journey, a really deep healing journey to retrieve that memory and to go into the process of healing that. And that was very essential because that memory of seeing that and seeing his courage in that was very significant because that was a rite of passage for me to be here to do what I'm here to do because I had my grandfather sacrifice his life so that I could see that act of courage. And that act of courage is literally what has me here today because I know that that's flowing in my blood. And my
Right.
grandfather is my powerful, protective ancestor. So his spirit is constantly present, protecting me. So yeah, that's a really significant aspect. I
Now,
mean, everything that we do in our
no,
lives,
I'm sorry. Go
what was
ahead.
that?
No,
No,
I
I
was
was
going to
just
ask
gonna
you
say,
another question.
I was gonna say everything that we go through in our lives on a soul level, right? Because on a personality level, it's easy for us to, you know, personalize things and not contextualize them in the grand cosmic scope. But for me, especially as a high priestess, like I have to put everything in the context of the soul's journey because I not only have to operate with the memory of this life, I have also operate with the memory of past lives as well. And everything that I chose, that we chose, I should say, as a collective spirit, as a divine force, that we chose for this spirit to incarnate and experience was to cultivate the character of me as I am. Same thing for you, Mama Regina. Everything from being on the streets at 14 years old and moving to Oakland, everything that you experienced, the story that you shared at the very beginning about your journey with school and just not feeling connected with school and all of that was part of cultivating your character and your personality for you
That's
to
true.
be and serve and exactly as you are, which is the
Mm-hmm.
divinity of perfection of what we are. But again, if we escape that and we don't go into mind into those traumatic experiences and the painful things that we've gone through in order to retrieve those gems and to integrate them into our lives and build our character on them, then those things actually begin to hinder us and become attachments that prevent us from activating our full potential.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is actually what I wanted to get to, not just for my own knowledge, but for people who are listening. I mean, because I get the impression, I could be wrong, but I'm probably right. Very often people will look at people like you and they will think that you're special. Well, you are, all of us are. But I mean, like, they might not see just what all that it took, okay,
Yeah.
to make you
Mm-hmm.
what you are right now. A lot of because of our horrendous history, particularly in this country and probably on the continent as well, where they were colonized, right? You just get used to being a certain way, so you don't think that change can happen for you. Like, Neff must be special. That's why, Dr.
Christian.
Regina, say that again.
I said I was Christian. I was Seven Day Adventist. So whenever I hear people just like, oh, you got it, like people who get real strong headed around religion and stuff, I'm like, I don't have that. I don't have no doubt in my mind people can come out of that spell. I did it. I was
Right.
molested child. I have had abortions. Like I've healed through
Yes.
many things. To be
Mm-hmm.
here, to say that I'm in right now, you don't just arrive here, right? It's not like Beyonce where you could put on a whole facade and only show people the glam and a certain side and curate what you want to put out. This is a very true and authentic expression of transformation. And that's part of my journey is to share and to tell my story because
Right.
that's really what you have to do. And again, you have to have those models, like what you just said. Like people have to know you have to go through your pain. Everybody's journey is not the same, but whatever your spirit, whatever we chose for you in this life, that's what you have to face. That's what you have to confront and eventually embrace so that you can be who you came here to become.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate you asking those questions, Mama Regina. I just want to shout out some of the comments. Welcome, Tehuti Ma'at, Material Lure. Always great to have you in the house. In Ghana, among the Akan, Black people are called Abibifo, Ibibifo, Bibirifo. What was interesting is I just learned that last strong, that is the same root word for a powerful person.
Ah,
Abiri.
a beautiful.
Interesting. Love that. Tum tum also means dark skinned, and another word for powerful is otunse. Tumi also means power. I speak the language and I never made the connection, which is interesting. Very interesting. Let me
Mm-hmm.
know if I put those words properly. Um, but I really appreciate you sharing that. I think expanding our language is always really important as well. Um, Akobin. So I
Tum
just
tum
also
also
love
means dark skin black. Okay.
that
Tum tum.
story. That's beautiful. Do you agree or utilize the term New African? That's a great question. Um, I'll first go ahead and say I don't use the term new at all in that context. You can new under the sun, but as Octavia Butler said, but there are new suns. So I use the term NU, Nu, which is the primordial waters in Medunetter,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
the force of that primordial essence of existence, those waters of Nu. And to me, it shows that even when we're creating something that we're birthing, rebirthing again, it's returning back to its original essence, right? Because it's always going to be that same water. It's that same water that rains. It's that same water in the ocean. It's the same water in our bodies. So I like to use the term "NU" whenever I use that. And I don't know. I like to just say we're African. Like we have to really just unite in that African at that. We just have to find whatever it's going to take for us to unite and create that Pan African objective that we need to come together as a people across cultures, across beliefs and traditions. Whatever it takes to do that is what we have to do. And I think a lot of that means we're going to have to, sacrifice some of the identities we're attached to, which does bring me back to something that you said, Mama Regina, earlier that I really wanted to touch on, which is this idea of the commodity and how
Mm-hmm.
um, you said Guinea was actually money. And
That's
thinking
right.
about that and how literally African people were first capital. So when we're talking about capitalism, that's the same thing. And you have mentioned that also that how our leaders have sold us out. And
Mm-hmm.
it's because of that. Like when we talk about the essence of our enslavement and why we say it still exists today, it is because we are still buying capitalism. We are still, our values are still aligned with the religion of
That's right.
capitalism. We're
Yep.
still
Yep.
attached to material possessions and material desire, right? As opposed to an intrinsic wealth and abundance that does come from the land, which, yes, it is material, but it's intrinsic. So there's an aspect of it that's beyond the material. And until we can root ourselves in both and go beyond that superficial layer of the three
Mm-hmm.
dimensional world and go
Mm-hmm.
deeper, what's the point? So that's the reality of like the Setian energy, right? That devil energy, the gravity energy, the death force.
is, it connects everything to the material. So that's why people are afraid to die because they're just attached to this life and have no conceptual or really no value for anything beyond the material.
Yes.
So that is what I feel is selling out because I don't think you can really sell your soul, you know, when they say that, because the soul is. But the idea of selling your soul is the fact that you would think that you could put a price on it. That's
Mm-hmm.
you selling your soul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Well,
know,
you know,
so I think,
atheism, that comes straight out of Europe. There were no atheists on the continent. With all the groups, they all believe in a higher power, whatever they called that higher power. The idea that there is, that we created ourselves, that we come out of the, I don't know what atheists think, but they do not believe that there's a higher power that intervenes on earth and, in fact, ushered us here to earth. And I
Yeah.
think, see, that's very important because these are the people that created the atomic bomb. I think I've mentioned this before,
yeah,
and I will always mention it. Now, okay, the Chinese, they had gunpowder, and for the most part, they used it to make, firecrackers when they were doing their ritualistic ceremonies and such. Now, they did use it against their enemies through a bamboo shoot, like that. So that's like, if you do kill, it's killing one person. It is Europeans who spliced the atom into so many pieces that they understood the energy that was encoded within it. And instead of doing some miraculous things with it, although some miraculous things have happened from it, but they created a bomb that could destroy this entire earth. And they are the first people to drop that sucker on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and killed, hundreds of thousands of people. Malcolm X often talked about that. And Malcolm X became friends with Yuri Kuchiyama, and she was Japanese, and her friends and family had actually experienced that destruction. Which, and you talk about the land. See, once an atomic bomb is dropped, it's not just going to scorch all the people, but it scorches the land, and the poisons from the bomb make food scarcity absolute, running rampant for years. And let's not even talk about the birth defects that come out of that. But let me even switch gears too, because you were talking about like Afraka and our naming. And in one of the books that I wrote, in fact, it's the Malcolm X book. Let me hold it up. By the way, these books out the library, I'm for this. The library carrying my work, so you don't even have to spend the money if you, because I really want you to read what I've written. Malcolm X, what he learned from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. If you listen to Malcolm's early speeches, he always talks about the Negro, the so-called Negro, and in doing that, he was preparing the way for us to not only transform the image of black, because black used to be satanic, evil, but it was also preparing the way for us to be African. Because in Malcolm's, I think the last 2 years of his life, that's what he started to call us. I mean, when he would be up at the mic, really just hitting it, he would tell the so-called Negroes, "You're not even Negro, you're Africans. I've been to Africa. I don't see much difference between the Africans on the continent and the Africans in Harlem." This set the
mm-hmm.
stage. This set the stage for us to then elevate to African American, or as Neff just said, African. Why is that important? It is important because a race of bastards, a race of enslavers, renamed us once they enslaved us. So it has been a long journey to come from the Negro with a little n, a
Yeah. And
little
I think,
n, not a capital N, a little n. Go ahead, Neff.
yeah. I was gonna ask you, was it Malcolm who said like, no, you're an African born in America, or an African born in the Caribbean, or an African born in England?
That's
Or
Malcolm. That is
yeah,
Malcolm, who had studied. Well, his father was a Garveyite, and his mother was a Garveyite. Okay, with her 8 or 7 children. Can you imagine this? God in heaven. And Malcolm's family were farmers, Neff. You probably know that, but I wanted to bring that up because you have made farming really precious. You actually have. You've made us think more about the land from where our food comes. Well, Malcolm X's parents were farmers, and Malcolm X's father, Earl, anything, he built their house, he built their bedrooms. And Malcolm learned how to farm. He learned how to take care of vegetables and chickens and so forth. All right. The family ate from their own hands. Okay.
mm-hmm.
They did not deal with going to the stores for food. They made food for the family with their own industriousness. And I think that's very, and see, Dig, I didn't even, when you first listen to Malcolm, I mean, he just hits you with them, the white man is the devil and whatever, whatever.
Who taught you
But
to hate
Malcolm,
yourself?
who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Malcolm, you all might remember, he talked about politicians being either a fox or a wolf. And when you really read a lot of his speeches, he uses so much animal imagery. And at first, when I was reading Malcolm and listening to Malcolm, I didn't really realize or put together Malcolm had been a farmer. Malcolm had been a farmer much
Yeah, and
of
food
his life.
sovereignty. There's no freedom without food sovereignty. The
Mm-hmm.
level of pride and esteem you feel when you eat something that you sowed that seed and you watch it grow and you watered it
Yeah,
and you watch it grow until it gets to that fruit and you get to eat it, or that vegetable and you get to eat it. There's no other feeling like it. There really
that's
is
right.
no feeling. So it's just something it does in terms of building your character. Because also him not seeing them rely externally for their sustenance
That's right.
was
That's
very,
right.
very to cultivating his character. So I didn't know that. So I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you are interested in supporting Mama Regina and reading her books, you can go to, it's scrolling along the bottom. It's also in the description box. Go to Mama Regina's website. It's a panthersister.com, and you can get her books there. And you can also, I don't know if they can get in contact with you there if you have any other.
Absolutely, they can. Sure. And I would love to hear from you. And like I said, those of you who might be a little short on cash, libraries are carrying my books. As a writer, I'm humbled, and I'm so proud. And it just started this summer, so I'm still like reveling
Yeah.
in that
And
accomplishment.
yeah, we're definitely going to integrate Mama Regina's books also into our Think Study group. Currently, the book that we're going to be doing is we're about to get started on The Falsification of African Consciousness by Dr. Amos and Wilson. So if you are interested in becoming a member of Tehuti Ma'at, you can join the militia by going to tehutimaat.org/join. If you join even at the Kingdom rank, which is $22 monthly, you get access to the ARC, the African Rehabilitation Center, that is also known as the Amos Wilson Collective. It's our collaboration between Tehuti Ma'at and the African War College. And you get access to our private server, so you get to join the different chats. You get to join the exclusive gatherings that we have every month. We have a community connect, we have a warrior workout, we have our Intuit healing ciphers. That's always the first Saturday or the closest Saturday to the new moon.
So all of that's coming up this month in September. So it's a great time to join, and you will be able to participate in our study group, Think. So we're doing Amos Wilson's The Falsification of African Consciousness. As I said, we'll absolutely be including Mama Regina's works. We're going to dive back into the blueprint for Black Power again as well. So great things ahead if you want to join. If you want to get access to Tehuti Ma'at Academy, or even just be able to have access to our exclusive content, our workshops and classes that we've done in the past, our archives, then you can join at the Empire Rank. And if you actually want to be a part of our cooperative, which we really suggest for people who are leaders or entrepreneurs, business owners, organizers, then you join at the Galaxy Rank, which allows you to initiate through Navigating Eternity. You get to go through the Navigating Eternity course, be part of the JED accountability community, and you get to contribute to our cooperative ventures. So all of that, more information on there. And if you do have any other questions, you can always just email us, or you can shoot a text to 646-883-MAAT, or email grow@tehutimaat.org. And again, the links are in the description in the bio, Mama Regina's website, Tehuti Ma'at. You can also follow us on Instagram at Tehuti Ma'at on Instagram. So I also want to shout out everybody who's been here with us live. If you have any final burning questions, feel free to put them in. I do want to shout out Nati to Dread. What up, bro? Blessings, sisters. May the ancestors guide us all. Ashe. Thank you for tuning in. For African people, it seems to be the commonality that God, placeholder term, I appreciate that, was existence itself, whereas Europeans might have thought differently. Yes, I think there was an externalized divinity for the European context, and still to this day, the way they even interpret our tradition is this external divinity. Or even a lot of the new age stuff, it's like you're still seeking something outside of you, or you're seeking this guide outside of you, where it's like if you are going to be aligned with the guide, that guide needs to be guiding you within yourself to empower you, not to be extracting your power. But also you put their science, it attempts to surpass the past and throw any ancestral wisdom as a result. And as a result of that, they limit the future. Good example is climate change. Don't even get me started on climate change, because I really should have went in on climate change in the nature episode we did. But what I will say about climate change is, yes, the climate is changing. The climate's always changing. We have to be very careful with the narratives that are presented to us, because the narrative of climate change is really built off of that global warming narrative. And I always like to tell people to remember that our planet is healing. When the body has a fever, that is not the disease. So we have to get out of that clinical idea of treating your body's immune response as if it's the sickness, when it's your body turning on the immune system to literally burn off the virus or whatever it senses. Body's first line of defense is turn up the temperature, turn up the heat, burn it out, right? So that fever is a natural response. So those fever reducers and all of that, that's pacifying it. That's essentially what they're trying to do when they're talking about stratospheric aerosols and spraying the chemtrails and all of that, which now it's not a conspiracy theory anymore because they're putting it out there. They're announcing it. They have their programs out in the clear now, which were secrets before. And anytime you brought it up, you were a conspiracy theorist. Nope, that's all climate change initiatives now. So just be aware that the planet is turning up the heat. The planet has a fever. It's trying to burn off the parasite. And last I checked, the sun was my friend. And the sun is your friend. So don't let them villainize the sun in your narrative of what's happening as the planet changes. However, we do have to take into consideration the need for us to connect with the land and to become stewards of the land again, to connect with nature and to restore nature, because this onslaught and this attack on nature is very real. So our goal is not sustainability, it's restoration. We're not trying to sustain capitalism. Capitalism gotta go. We're trying to restore the planet because we are on a regenerative planet. We talked about this before. The planet is literally designed to regenerate itself. So, what we have to do is kind of step back and allow it to do that and to support it in doing that as part of the ecosystem because we are a part of the ecosystem. So, yes, climate change is something I get real passionate about. Yes. Oh, you're on mute. Let me take it off.
Oh, okay.
Regina?
There was just a climate conference in Africa. I think it was in Ghana. Don't hold me to that, but it was in one of the African countries just a couple days ago. What's I want us to be watchful of, right? Um, is just how far these new African leaders listen to the Western countries, tell them that they must go green in a Western kind of way. Okay, so I can see you got some fuss on that because once I saw the conference, I was like, oh Lord, because all of these European countries were in Africa, right, for 2 days, and it's like now I wasn't there, but I did get reports because I look at alternative news reports. But it just feels like now they're gonna put on Africa like they are the cause of climate shifts. When even if you read Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization, he's going to even talking about in Kemet when there were changes, and the Earth is always changing for whatever reason. So I just wanted to bring that
With
up
that,
since we got
yeah,
that
I'm
question. Go ahead.
glad that you said that, Mama Regina. I'm so glad. Now I go in on this. If you join the militia and you go in at the Empire rank, what you'll get access to is a two-part lecture that I did. It's a very powerful lecture. Like I'm absolutely
Okay.
on this. Very powerful lecture. It was one of our war talks with the War College, the African War College, and it's called Countering Chemical Warfare. And we go in on this now. What I wanted to speak on is a lot of people don't know what's going on with these. We have to look at, like I said, the global politics, right? Not the national distraction. So when we're talking about global governance, we're talking about the bureaucracy that's currently in place, known as the United Nations. They're the ones leading this whole narrative on climate change. Now, where this begins is what I need people to know the historical context for. So I'm going to briefly just touch on this because what's important for us to know is they're creating the whole economy. They're literally they're doing a controlled demolition of the economic disorder that already exists in order to create a new financial paradigm that taps directly into the grid and gives them more control. Now, within that, what's happening, they're creating a whole economy around the green revolution, right? All of the things around climate change and sustainable development is what they call it. Now, there's a bank called GEF, the Global Environmental Facility. They're creating new bonds now. Like, because they create these negotiable instruments, right? These bonds and these different things that they trade in the market. And we're completely out of the loop because we really don't get how this whole paradigm works. This is just literally like a gambling racket, like if you really think about it. But what I wanted to speak on is they established in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, they had the Earth Summit. This is one of the first environmental gatherings that they had. And they this included the Rockefeller-funded Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. You also had the UN Environmental Program, and you had the World Wildlife Fund, all involved in this. And what they started doing is creating these debt chains that were created from the World Bank and the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So we're talking about going to really what's really going on. Who's really pulling the strings and who's really calling the shots. Because when we're talking about our financial system, we have to look at everything globally, like I said. So
what's important for people to recognize is the language that's being used right now is sustainable development, and that comes straight out of the Agenda 21, the agenda for the 21st century that the United Nations put out. And we have to be very clear that their intention is to get us off of land, move us into cities where they control everything, and they get to control the land. They're putting massive swaths of land into these conservatories and these environmental funds and these heritage sites and all of these different strategies that they have for taking the land from the people. Quite literally, right now in Africa, what they're doing are what they call debt for nature swaps. Debt for nature swaps. They're literally, and this was introduced by Thomas Lovejoy of the World Wildlife Fund in 1984. So this has been around. In 1998, the US law through the Tropical Forest Conservation Act literally codified this even deeper. So they're literally moving African people off of their land, literally in Uganda. In Uganda, there's an Oxford report on this called Sustainable Tree Plantations, where they're literally taking these carbon trade credits. They're taking Ugandans off of their land to go and build trees because they want to reduce the carbon footprint. Okay? And coming back to that, I'm going to just close with that because language wise, remember what I said about the carbon? When we identify ourselves as carbon, we're very clear on what they're saying when they say they want to reduce the carbon footprint. And I'm also going to bring it spiritually because we have to recognize that everything has to operate in universal law. They have to say what they're going to do. There's a reason why the French are able to have that neo-colonial regime in Africa right now. They created a contract. They put it in writing, on paper. Someone signed that. That's how they're able to exploit Africa. So they still have to follow universal law. They're not exempt to universal law. They have to declare what they're doing. And they say it. And they put out these treaties and they put out these things. But again, we're not using our discernment. We're not politically, economically, and culturally astute enough to know what they're saying when they're saying it. So that's why we have to be crystal clear on our identity, our knowledge of self, and our knowledge of our enemy in order to be able to navigate the minefield, because it's not that simple. And I get that for a lot of people, like, how are you going to know this? So
That's why
I'm just glad.
study is so important.
Absolutely.
That's why study is so important, in particular group study.
Yes. So, yes, join the militia if you want to tune in to our group studies and everything that we're doing when we come together. And we're serious about building. So, if you're not serious about revolution, it's not the space for you. However, if you're looking to do your healing work and you just want to learn more, then I suggest joining at the Kingdom rank because you'll still get access to the community and you'll get to expand your consciousness and your awareness about certain things. So it's a great space to just come in and have that space for personal development and really going through your, even if it's just going through your trauma and your pain and figuring out your purpose and all those fundamental things as well. So I do want to shout everyone else out. I know we can't touch on the rest of these questions. Dr. Ray Hagins, I don't know if you know who Dr. Ray Hagins is, Mama Regina, if you have any thoughts on Dr. Ray Hagins. Oh, you're on mute. Well, can you repeat that?
Uh, they're not too pleasant, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All I can say about Dr. Ray Hagins is I've never met this person and I don't know much about this person, but they do not resonate with me. And for me, I just go off of my intuition, and intuitively, this just doesn't feel right there. I can't qualify that with you with anything tangible. But for what it's worth, trust the womb. And their sensibility of green is biomimicry. Yeah, it's really interesting how
they like to use nature when it's to their advantage. And it's like this language. Indo-European culture is like one big get rich quick scheme, but on a more massive level. Yes, it is. Because really, what's deeply rooted there is a deep pain and an inadequacy because of that inability to process those photons from the sun. And that's a painful thing that they're going to have to process and heal, you know? So, not my business, as I like to say. However, I am here focused. So, my my song goes, it goes, the only thing I'm ready to go to war for is my people. Okay.
That's it.
We got a lot of healing to do. So, as the elders of the planet, I feel that the healing of African people, of Africa, will heal the entire planet. Because once we take our position of authority in our rightful place, we create order. And that is our destiny. So, Ashe. Thank you again to everyone who tuned in with us live today. I want to again remind everyone to support Mama Regina at her website at panthersister.com. You can order her books there. And for more information on Tehuti Ma'at, you can visit tehutima'at.org. And we'll see you next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time again for our next episode. All right, power. Wow, Mama Regina.